On June 1, 1962, the world learned that Adolf Eichmann, one of the Holocaust's main architects, was dead. The official story was clean, a procedural act of justice. It was a quiet affair, the necessary end to a monster's life, carried out with solemn, clinical precision. The public was told that the chapter was closed, and the world could finally move on. But that's not the whole story. What if I told you the official account of Eichmann's final hours hides a far more disturbing reality? A reality filled with conflicting reports, haunting sounds from a dead man's chest, an executioner tormented for the rest of his life, and a secret, custom-built furnace heated to an astonishing 1,800 degrees Celsius. This furnace wasn't just designed to cremate a body, but to completely obliterate a legacy from the face of the earth. This is the untold story of Adolf Eichmann's death, a death that was much, much more brutal than you can imagine. Before we can understand the brutality of his end, you have to understand the man. Adolf Eichmann wasn't the kind of foaming-at-the-mouth monster we often see in movies. He was something far more chilling, a bureaucrat. A logistics expert. The writer Hannah Arendt, who covered his trial, famously called it the banality of evil, and it's a terrifyingly perfect description. Eichmann wasn't giving hateful speeches or pulling triggers. As the head of the Gestapo's Department for Jewish Affairs, his job was to make the trains run on time. Except these trains weren't carrying commuters, they were carrying millions of men, women, and children to their deaths in ghettos and extermination camps. He was the ultimate middle manager of murder, the coordinator who ensured the machinery of the final solution ran smoothly. He organized the timetables for death, calculated the capacity of cattle cars, and made sure nothing interrupted his horrifyingly efficient system. When the Third Reich collapsed in 1945, the master organizer of death simply vanished. He escaped Allied custody and, with the help of sympathizers, made his way to Argentina. He became Ricardo Clement, settling into a quiet life in Buenos Aires as a factory foreman, a husband, and a father. For 15 years, he lived as a ghost, likely believing he had gotten away with it. But the new state of Israel, born from the ashes of the very catastrophe Eichmann helped engineer, never forgot. Its intelligence agency, the Mossad, never stopped searching. In 1960, acting on a tip, they finally found him. On the evening of May 11, 1960, as Eichmann stepped off a bus near his home, a team of Mossad agents closed in. One agent approached and said the only Spanish phrase he knew, "Un momentito, señor, one moment, sir." In that moment, his life as Ricardo Clement was over. He was wrestled into a car and spirited away to a secret safe house. For days, they held him, and he finally admitted his true identity. "Ich bin Adolf Eichmann, I am Adolf Eichmann." Getting him out of Argentina was another challenge. They drugged him, dressed him in the uniform of an Israeli airline employee, and propped him up between two agents, pretending he was a drunk crew member who'd been in an accident. On May 21, 1960, he was smuggled out of Argentina and flown to Israel to stand trial. The quiet life of Ricardo Clement was over, and the final, brutal chapter of Adolf Eichmann's life was about to begin. The trial of Adolf Eichmann, which began on April 11, 1961, was a spectacle unlike anything the world had ever seen. While not the absolute first trial to be on television, it was one of the first major international trials to be so extensively broadcast, sending the horrors of the Holocaust into living rooms across the globe. This was by design. Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion knew this trial wasn't just about one man, it was about creating a definitive public record of the genocide for a new generation. At the center of it all was Eichmann, sitting inside a specially constructed bulletproof glass booth to protect him from assassins. The world saw not a monster, but a man, balding, bespectacled, in an ill-fitting suit, looking more like a clerk than a mass murderer. He sat diligently taking notes, which only amplified the horror. This was what evil looked like, not a demon, but a man who had abdicated his humanity to follow orders. His defense was simple: he was just a functionary, a small cog in a vast machine. "I was just following orders," he repeated endlessly. He admitted to organizing the transports but insisted he felt no guilt for the consequences. In his own mind, he was a victim of circumstance. But his bureaucratic defense shattered under the weight of testimony. For weeks, the prosecution brought Holocaust survivors to the stand. One by one, they faced the man in the glass booth and spoke of the unspeakable. They described the ghettos, the cattle cars, the gas chambers, the smell of burning flesh. The courtroom was filled with raw, unfiltered grief. People wept, shouted, and fainted. Through it all, Eichmann watched, largely impassive, from behind his glass shield. The contrast was horrifying, the living pain of the victims confronting the cold, administrative denial of the perpetrator. On December 15, 1961, Adolf Eichmann was found guilty on 15 counts, including crimes against the Jewish people and crimes against humanity. The judges dismissed his defense and sentenced him to death by hanging. It would be the first and only civil execution in the history of the State of Israel. Eichmann appealed the verdict, even writing a letter to the President of Israel, Yitzhak Ben-Zvi, pleading for clemency. He again portrayed himself as a mere instrument who shouldn't bear the ultimate blame. The plea was rejected. The execution was set for the night of May 31, 1962. The air in Ramla prison on that final night was thick with tension. Outside, streets were cordoned off. Inside, the preparations were meticulous. A makeshift gallows had been assembled, a grim structure built for a single purpose, to be torn down as soon as its work was done. Around 8 p.m., Eichmann was informed his plea had been denied and the sentence would be carried out that night. According to reports, his only reaction was a clipped, "Joel, all right." He declined a last meal but asked for a bottle of Israeli red wine and drank half of it. A Protestant minister offered to read the Bible with him, but Eichmann refused, stating he had only 2 more hours to live and no time to waste. He spent his final hours writing letters to his family. Just before midnight, the guards came. He was walked to the execution chamber, calm and self-possessed. When the guards moved to tie his ankles and knees, he reportedly asked them to loosen the bonds so he could stand perfectly straight. When a guard offered him the traditional black hood, Eichmann's response was sharp: "I don't need that." He would face his end with his eyes open. With the noose around his neck, he was given the chance for last words. Standing over the trapdoor, he spoke in a steady, defiant voice: "Long live Germany! Long live Argentina! Long live Austria! These are the 3 countries with which I have been most connected and which I will not forget. I greet my wife, my family, and my friends. I am ready. We will meet again soon, as is the fate of all men. I die believing in God." Another witness, Mossad officer Rafi Eitan, later claimed Eichmann also muttered, "I hope that all of you will follow me." At 11:58 p.m., a lever was pulled. The trapdoor swung open, and Adolf Eichmann dropped. This is where the public story ends. But the moment his body disappeared from view is when the truly brutal reality of his execution began. The goal of a hanging is a quick death, but official accounts and witness memories of that night don't perfectly align. The sanitized version is that it was a clean, swift end. But some of those present tell a different, more disturbing story. Shalom Nagar was one of the guards chosen to carry out the execution. He later described the scene in visceral detail. After Eichmann fell, he didn't die instantly but slowly strangled. The real horror, for Nagar, began after Eichmann was finally declared dead. As guards handled the body, a horrific, gurgling sound suddenly erupted from Eichmann's chest, the sound of trapped air being violently expelled from his lungs. It was a sound so unnerving it would echo in the nightmares of those who heard it for decades. Nugger's description of the body was graphic. Eichmann's face was white as chalk, his eyes were bulging and his tongue was dangling out. He went on, the rope rubbed the skin off his neck, and his tongue and chest were covered in blood. This wasn't a quiet, clinical affair. It was ugly, physical, and brutal. The psychological toll was immense, especially for Shalom Nugger. He was a Yemeni Jew who had become a prison guard. When it came time for the execution, so many people wanted the job that a lottery was held. Nugger was chosen but didn't want the duty. He only agreed after his superiors showed him horrific photos of children murdered in the Holocaust. That night, Nugger said, it was just me and Eichmann. I was standing a few feet from him and looked him straight in the eye. I pulled the handle and he fell. The act haunted him. He suffered from severe PTSD and nightmares, and eventually left the prison service to become a kosher butcher. His identity as the executioner was a state secret for 30 years, finally revealed in 1992. For Shalom Nugger, who passed away in 2024, the execution of Adolf Eichmann never really ended. But the brutality of that night still wasn't over. Israel had a problem: what to do with the body. They couldn't bury it. Any grave could become a shrine for neo-Nazis. The only solution was absolute erasure. For this, they turned to a man named Pinchas Zaklikovsky. The irony is staggering. Zaklikovsky was a Holocaust survivor who had endured the Lodz ghetto and Buchenwald. In 1940, he had even seen Eichmann from a distance during one of the officers' inspection tours. Now, as a professional oven builder, he was commissioned to build a special, one-time-use cremation oven inside Ramla prison, designed to reach 1,800 degrees Celsius to ensure complete incineration. Though official policy forbade survivors from participating, an exception was made for Zaklikovsky. He later described the moment guards placed the body in the furnace. I saw his feet hanging out, Zaklikovsky recalled. So I took a hoe, pushed him inside, and closed the door. The man who had seen Eichmann as a figure of terror was now, with a simple farm tool, pushing that same man's corpse into a furnace of his own making. He stayed to supervise, ensuring the architect of industrial murder was reduced to ash. The final act of this brutal saga took place in the pre-dawn hours of June 1, 1962. After the furnace cooled, the handful of ashes that remained of Adolf Eichmann were collected and placed into a metal jug, which some say was a milk can. Around 4:30 a.m., the jug was taken to an Israeli Navy patrol boat. The boat motored out into the Mediterranean Sea, past the limit of Israel's territorial waters. There, in the dark, anonymous waves, a police officer opened the container and scattered the ashes into the wind and onto the sea. This was the final, deliberate act of erasure. No grave. No marker. Not a single point on earth where Adolf Eichmann's remains could rest. The state had not only executed the man, it had meticulously unmade him, ensuring not a single molecule would contaminate the soil of the nation he sought to annihilate. The execution of Adolf Eichmann wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a carefully choreographed act of historical finality. The public saw a trial and a hanging. The private reality was far more grisly, emotionally damaging, and complex. From the conflicting accounts of his death, to the haunting memories of his executioner, and the final, fiery obliteration by a Holocaust survivor, every hidden step was steeped in a brutal, visceral reality. It was a death designed to close a chapter of history with such force that it could never be reopened. But it leaves us with a difficult question. In the pursuit of justice for unimaginable crimes, was this level of absolute erasure not only justified, but necessary? If this look into one of history's darkest postscripts held your attention, let us know by hitting the like button. And if you'd like to explore more strange and mysterious corners of the past, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Thank you for watching.